Okay, I'm going to start off before we get into the word proper by sort of giving you a tour of London. But it's going to be a tour of London's spiritual scene in a way. And I've sort of taken the tour over the past week or so myself. So, you guys ready to go on a tour of London's spiritual scene together? All right, let's go. In this first picture here is some pictures from the North Atlantic Polemics Conference. And you'll see there various pastors, people from all over this conference, and a lot of it is how to learn to properly engage with Islam, focusing on what are called polemics. That means a critical analysis. But if you look right there, that guy pointing at me, he is a former Albanian Muslim. And he met up with us at the conference there because he wanted to tell me that he's been following some of our stuff, and a year ago he got baptized, and now he goes to a Reformed Baptist church here in London. Last night I was down on Church Street in Croydon, and down there I walked into a store called Nashat, and they try to bill it as a Afrocentric wellness store. Come get these natural juices and herbs, but if you look closely, and I already knew this before I went there, this is why I went there. If you look closely, you'll see pictures of a man. And the man is named Dr. Malachi Z. York. Who is that? Well, he was hanging out in Brooklyn, New York back in the day, started his own cult. It was Islamic. Then he dropped the Islam thing, kind of picked up a Hebrew thing. Then he dropped the Hebrew thing. Then he picked up a Native American thing. Then he picked up the Egyptian thing. Then he picked up the alien thing. Essentially, it's a UFO cult. And they have a store right on Church Street in Croydon. You just jump off the tram, there it is. They have a 2.5-hour Q&A session. So I was there last night. You want me to tell you some of the things that I heard? And by the way, I'm with a dummy. I don't mean a member of the congregation. A mannequin wearing one of the uniforms they would wear when they're out on the street. If you ever go to Whitgift, you'll see him passing out stuff. Come learn from a master teacher. That type of stuff, all right? So here I am. I go down in the basement, and they're talking about higher frequencies and vibrations, and Jesus learned mysteries from Egypt, and then he went back, but they weren't ready for him, so it didn't work out. But then he came again in the form of Malachi Z. York, and this time they were ready because the first time was the age of Pisces. This time's the age of the sun, and so it's the age of Aquarius, so it's enlightening, and now Z. York brought it, and now if we can all tune in to the higher frequency, we will be able to literally transform our bodies into spacecraft and do space travel. Have you guys ever seen Transformers? More than meets the eye. They actually believe you can achieve that via tuning into a higher frequency, and you'll eventually be able to achieve this. They think they're on the brink of that, but first you got to have the key. What's the key? The master teacher. Where's the master teacher? He's in a federal penitentiary for molesting over 100 children. But you can still buy a bracelet that says free, Dr. Malachi Z. York. And they run a shop right here. And I was hanging out with them last night. At the end, they started telling me about channeling. That's a whole nother story. Now, as you walk through Whitgift, you'll see Muslim booths all over doing what's called, anybody know it's a word that starts with D? Dawah, which means to invite. Yeah, it's their form of evangelism, means invite you to Islam. That's the friendly way to invite you to Islam, if you know what I mean. So we're there at a table there and talk to that gentleman who says he's a sheikh. But if you want more of that, you go to Speaker's Corner. And that's where I'm going to be going when I leave you fine, ladies and gentlemen, later today. Now, the point is not to tell you, look what I'm doing. The point is to say, look at your city. You have a lot here, a lot of people, a lot of beliefs, and we can't just sit around drinking our lattes, crossing our legs, saying, what do you think this Bible passage means? That's good, but we got to do something on the internet, on the streets, in writing, face-to-face, voice-to-voice, eye-to-eye. This is what they did in the book of Acts. You want to see the miracle of Acts? You got to get out there like Acts. You know? So, Speaker's Corner can be a bit dodgy, as they say. Okay, sorry, we like to employ those every now and then. And there's bare Muslims there. Yeah. But what you want to do is, if you want to have a kind of a more personal conversation, you can't be in the center with the cameras. It's a circus. So I try to go out to the side and have conversations with people. There's a Sufi Muslim I'm talking with, and we actually had quite a good conversation. He's kind of a mystical type of Muslim guy, but we were able to have a good conversation. And so these things can be done, and it's interesting. At Speaker's Corner, I only saw one fight break out, and I was like, oh, man. Now, it was mainly just a couple pushing, then people intervened. Nothing bad, right? Just a couple pushes, like in a sporting match. You know, it's real brief, right? And I said, man, that's too bad. Who is that group? I don't recognize them. I was figuring it was one of the Christians with us, right? And the Muslim next to me goes, oh, that's the Shia and Sunni. I was like, oh, they're the ones fighting. Okay. Well, I mean, that's not good, but I'm glad it wasn't us. The only pushing match I saw was Shia versus Sunni. Fascinating, right? But the beautiful thing is, right here in this city, that's me over there in the corner talking to the gentleman I mentioned earlier. His name is Saeed. Pray for him. I also went, and you can go here, and I encourage you to go here into the library. Anybody know what's in the British Library? One of the oldest Bibles on the planet Earth. One of the oldest complete Bibles. It's a Greek Old and New Testament. It's called Codex. You got it. Sinaiticus. He knows. That's beautiful. And it's free. You just walk in there and you can take a picture. Just don't use the flash. This Bible dates from the early 300s, maybe the mid 300s, sometime around there. And it's a marvel to look at. Now, they got it open to a part at the end of Luke and the beginning of John. And sometimes they have different pages open. But this is one of the oldest complete Bibles on planet Earth. And it's right here. And you can also go to the British Museum and see more biblical artifacts right here in this city. But in the midst of that confirmation, rather, you also have confusion and chaos, such as our friends, the Hebrew Israelites. Isn't it a fun thing to go take selfies with Hebrew Israelites? Well, I did on the border of Hackney and Clissold Park. I went out there, and they were out there preaching their doctrine about enslaving whites and Arabs and Indians and Asians in the future. That's what they teach.
We're ready to kill people and all that stuff. We're reading to you out of the Bible what the Israelites are going to do. Yes, there will be death in the kingdom of heaven.
And I came to confront them. Jude 3 says, contend for the faith. They were not happy I was there. And we had a conversation, if you could call it that. But it was street apologetics. Now, it was interesting because most of the time it was raining. So if you look, they're under these umbrellas. And it's just such an iconic scene. But I'm a real man. I don't believe in umbrellas, so I just had a hoodie on. You can't have an umbrella if you're a real man unless there's a child, a dog, or maybe a female next to you. I'm just teasing. Dog doesn't need it. In all seriousness, I ran into Israelites there because I went to find them. But then I'm at the train station, and a guy says, Vocab, are you looking for the Israelites? And I turn, and it's a Hebrew Israelite who works for Southern Railway who recognized me. We start talking. He says, did you see the coronation of the King of England? Yeah, there's all the symbolism in there recognizing we're the Israelites. And in fact, what's the name of our flag? You guys know the name of your flag. What's its next name? Union Jack. That means a union of Jacob's sons. Britain used to be ruled by black Israelites. Anglo-Saxon. That means Isaac's sons. Showing the original rulers of Britain were black Israelites. In fact, here's this picture of King James. He's originally a black Israelite. So I pull up on my phone. Here's a painting commissioned by an artist during King James' lifetime, and he's not a black guy. That's been touched over. Here's another one. That's also been touched over. Do you have any evidence these were touched over? Because that's what the white man does, is what he says. But the point is, you have all this here. Then you go to the British Museum, and you can see confirmation, artifact after artifact, letting you know the things written in here are true. This is all right here. You guys have your work cut out for you. Now, you have some apologists. This is Justin Brierley. He used to host a show on Unbelievable, Premier Christian Radio. And I met up with him. We did a little interview, which was cool. And he said, I can't go tonight. I said, go where? He said, to the Royal Institution. I said, why? There's a bunch of atheists and a Christian down there talking about morality. You want to go? I said, yeah. So next thing I know, I'm at the Royal Institution in Justin Brierley's seat, seeing Peter Singer, who believes that children, once they're born, should have a 30-day return policy in which you can abort them after they're born. And this is in premier ethicist. He believes that pigs are more cognizant than infants, therefore should have more rights. And he's on the panel, well respected, next to Alex O'Connor, cosmic skeptic, next to a guy who specializes in Eastern worldviews, Buddhism, Hinduism, next to Richard Swinburne, the one Christian on the panel who was a philosopher. It was an interesting discussion. And I'm leaving, and a guy says, "Hey, I recognize you. Who are you?" And he says, "I know you. You're David Wood's friend." He didn't know who I was. I said, "Yes." So I talked to him, but guess what? He was an atheist about a year ago. And now he's come to faith, and he's at this event. He was by himself, a young guy who was an atheist, who used to believe some of this silliness that they were talking about on the Mystery of Morality panel. And now he's a believer in Jesus Christ. So Jesus is still saving people, and you can find Christians who are born again, baptized, and believing in the Holy Spirit, even at an event where you got a guy in the panel who thinks pigs have more rights than kids. But you got other apologists in the city. This guy, Soros, did you know he has a TV show? Psalm's House. Who's seen Psalm's House? It's brand new. You need to make sure you check it out on Revelation TV. So I went on there. We did an interview. It was beautiful. And then he said, you know, there's a museum for John Bunyan out in Bedford, the one who wrote Pilgrim's Progress, who was jailed for 12 years for not preaching according to the king's edict. And so we drove out to Bedford, and there is Soros hanging out with John Bunyan. We went to the John Bunyan Museum. Who's John Bunyan? John Bunyan wrote Pilgrim's Progress. So this is cool. Like, I do multiple interviews on one day. I'm all excited because none of this stuff was planned before I went. Then, next thing I know, boom, John Bunyan, Pilgrim's Progress author. We had to drive like an hour or some out of town, but it was totally worth it. There's Soros standing with John Bunyan's, likeness. We got to meet the pastor of the church. It's called Bunyan Meeting House. It's a Reformed church. The center of the town square there in Bedford has what? It has a statue of John Bunyan. So I was making jokes about paying homage to the statue, even though we're not Catholic. We have our own idols. I was joking about this. But it was so artistic. They even had scenes from the book Pilgrim's Progress embedded in the statue and also in the museum, in the church, and the stained glass window. Was epic. And they don't really let you take pictures of the museum except for there's an old pulpit there, and they say, here's one of the places where you can take a picture. So we took some pictures. We were preaching from this old pulpit, just having fun. It was 1667, it says. Now, if you haven't read Pilgrim's Progress, I heavily recommend it. If you haven't been in the museum, I also heavily recommend it. If you haven't hung out Soros, I also recommend that. He produces tracts designed for urban context, such as Is Christianity the White Man's Religion? You got to get these tracts. So why do I tell you all this? This wasn't just a, look what I've done, isn't that a pretty picture of a sunset? It's to show you this is a spiritual landscape. I mean, I didn't even include this other stuff I picked up. I'm at the train station, and I see a book sitting there by the Seventh-day Adventists. They're here as well. They're going to try to push law keeping on you as if that's the way to be saved. And a lot of them would say what we're doing right now means that we are actually taking the mark of the beast, worshiping on Sunday. You'll see IUIC, a Hebrews Light group. They're going to say, don't you know this is the real Jesus? But then you ask them about Jesus. They don't believe he's God. They believe he's a created God. There's no such thing as that, by the way. Then you keep on going, and you see a guy that says, if you don't use the real name of Jesus, you're going to hell because you're worshiping a demon. That's what he says. Jesus is big God. That's what he says. This is all in your city, and I haven't even been here that long. And this is filled with other stuff from Muslims and other groups such as Falun Gong, a Chinese cult, all right here in this city. This is like modern day Athens. So why am I here to tell you I love you and make sure you're on the ball? Why do people believe these things? Because they are answering legitimate questions, even if the answers are bad. So some of you, when you look at culture, like, yeah, these people are dumb. Don't do that. Try to find out what is it that got them into this and attracted them. And then you'll find the root issue. Then speak the gospel to that in wisdom. But guess what you got to do, Christian, to do that? Listen. We operate according to the gospel of the glory of the blessed God with which I have been entrusted, which you have been entrusted, which we have been entrusted with. Paul says in 1 Timothy 1:18 that we need to fight the good fight. It is a fight, ladies and gentlemen, and you need to fight the good fight.